Hi guys, today we're going to be talking about a poem from the 19th century called Charge of the Light Brigade, which is by Alfred Lord Tennyson. So starting with a bit of context, Alfred Tennyson, who is here, was a very famous and celebrated Victorian poet who was also the poet laureate for a very long period of time. The poem itself is about the Battle of Balaclava during the Crimean War, which is widely known as one of the most ill-fated defeats in British military history. A misunderstood order meant that 600 cavalrymen charged down a narrow valley straight into the fire of Russian cannons. Over 150 British soldiers were killed and more than 120 were wounded. The poem was written in 1854, only 6 weeks after the event occurred, and therefore we can read this poem as an immediate response and perhaps a very reliable source as to the contemporary reactions to the humiliation and what some people consider a sacrifice that took place. So, if we start by looking at the language that Tennyson uses in the poem, firstly, a few areas of perhaps slightly difficult vocabulary. We've got the word league, which is a very old word for describing a considerable distance or unit of length. We see this at the beginning with half a league, half a league, half a league onward. Cossack, group of people living around the Black Sea near Russia. We see that in the line Cossack and Russian. And also a sabre, which is a type of weapon, type of knife, sword that they used to use back in the 19th century, and is where we get the word lightsaber from, and we can see a sabre just here. So if we look at sort of rhetorical devices that Tennyson uses, he uses lots of anaphora, which is the same word repeated at the start of every line, such as in the third stanza, where the word cannon is repeated on 3 consecutive lines, cannon to the right of them, cannon to the left of them, cannon in front of them, creating a sense of the inevitability of military defeat and death and the unrelenting nature of war. Cannons are literally bombarding them. They're being fired at from all sides. Tennyson also uses lots of personification and religious allusions throughout the poem. For example, he describes the jaws of death and into the mouth of hell in... Here we go. And this again creates a foreboding sense that death is omnipresent and follows the soldiers everywhere. Hell is not the only religious reference in the poem. The mention of the Valley of Death is a reference to Psalm 23 from the Bible. Through using biblical language, Tennyson manages to elevate the importance of the battle to that of heroic level, emphasising the almost epic nature of the defeat. Tennyson also uses rhetorical questions throughout the poem, such as, was there a man dismayed, and when can their glory fade? Encouraging the reader to play a more active role within the poem and explicitly urging them not to allow the heroic sacrifices of these men to be forgotten. For a defeat that's so controversial, Tennyson had a clear argument within the poem. The willingness of the cavalry to sacrifice themselves without calling their orders into question is what makes them heroes. In terms of rhythm and form throughout the poem, there are several aspects of the poem that are similar to a ballad form. A ballad is a poem that narrates a story in short stanzas. Here we can see the very short stanzas, and is often passed on orally from one generation to the next. Tennyson uses uncomplicated and simple language to make the poem more accessible to a larger Victorian readership. In terms of metre, Tennyson typically uses dimeter, which means 2 stressed or emphasised syllables a line. If we, for example, take the line, was there a man dismayed? Here. We can hear that was and man are strongly emphasised. Was there a man dismayed? This potentially creates a sound effect of horses' hooves galloping, but a more plausible effect is that the first beat of each metrical metre is emphasised before weakening away, creating a falling effect, mirroring perhaps the soldiers as they die.